I hadn't planned on being back in town this summer. College had been its own kind of escape. Long classes, chaotic roommates, and cheap coffee that somehow tasted better the later it got. But after my summer internship fell through and my landlord decided to renovate, I had nowhere else to go. So I packed 2 suitcases and took the train back to the place where everything felt both too familiar and impossibly distant. My hometown hadn't changed much. The same cracked sidewalks, the same gas station with its flickering sign. Even the high school still had that old banner half hanging from the gym wall, faded letters welcoming a graduating class that had long moved on. Josh, my best friend since 4th grade, wasn't around this summer. He had landed a study abroad opportunity in Florence, and his Instagram was full of cobblestone streets, espressos, and blurry shots of sunlit cathedrals. We texted once or twice, but time zones and new experiences made the distance feel more real than ever. So, on my 3rd day back, out of some mixture of boredom and nostalgia, I walked over to his house. They lived only a few blocks from my parents. I must have made that walk 1,000 times over the years, chasing each other on bikes, lugging over video game consoles, sneaking out for late-night pizza runs. His house was a second home to me growing up. I don't know what I expected when I knocked on the door. Maybe I thought his mom wouldn't be home. Maybe I just wanted to see if it still smelled like cinnamon candles and lemon cleaner. But when the door opened and I saw her, I froze. Rachel. She looked different, still beautiful, in that calm, understated way she always carried herself. But there was something else now, a tiredness in her eyes, a softness that hadn't been there before. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, a few streaks of silver curling at her temples. She was wearing a loose cardigan over a white tank top, her sleeves rolled up as if she'd been cleaning or maybe cooking. When she saw me, her eyes widened just slightly. "Ryan." I smiled awkwardly. "Hey, Mrs. Bennett." Her face lit up then, and something about that smile made my chest ache in a way I didn't expect. "Oh my God," she said, stepping out and pulling me into a hug. "It's been years." I hugged her back. Warm, familiar, but different now. I was taller than her. That realization hit me in a strange way. "You're all grown up," she said as she pulled back. "Look at you. What are you now, 21? "Yeah, just finished junior year." "Wow," she said softly, like the number meant something heavier than it should. We stood there for a beat too long, unsure of what came next. "I heard Josh is in Italy this summer," I said finally. She nodded. "Yeah, left a few weeks ago. First time he's been that far away for that long." There was something in her voice. Not sadness exactly, but something quieter. Like the space he left behind was more than just a room. "Well," she added quickly, smiling again, "you're here now." I shrugged. "Just for the summer. Figured I'd crash at my parents' place. Avoid paying rent. Avoid responsibility." She laughed. That same light laugh I remembered from when she'd scold us gently for muddy shoes or stolen cookies. "Well, come in," she said. "You're not staying on the porch." The moment I stepped inside, it hit me. Nothing had changed. The framed family photos still lined the hallway. The scent of lavender and baked bread lingered faintly in the air. A pair of Josh's old cleats still sat by the back door, as if waiting for a game that would never come. "You want anything?" she asked, heading toward the kitchen. "Water? Iced tea." "Iced tea sounds perfect." She poured it from a glass pitcher, the kind with lemon slices floating at the top. I sat at the island counter, watching her move around like she had 1,000 times before, except now I noticed the way her fingers lingered on the glass, the way the afternoon light fell across her cheekbones. "So," she said, sliding the glass toward me, "what brings you by? Nostalgia?" I grinned. "Something like that. Just felt weird being back in town and not stopping by. Well, I'm glad you did. She paused. It's quieter here lately. There was something in the way she said it. I took a sip. Yeah, it kind of feels like the whole town slowed down while we were gone. She nodded, eyes distant for a second. We talked a bit more. About school, about her work. She'd cut back her hours at the bookstore. About how fast Josh had grown up. But there was a rhythm to the conversation I hadn't expected. Like two people catching up, not just adult and kid. I stayed longer than I meant to. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. "Thanks for the tea," I said. "Thanks for the company," she replied. As I turned to leave, she added, "Don't be a stranger, Ryan." I looked back. Her eyes held mine for just a second longer than they needed to. "I won't," and I meant it. But I didn't know then that I'd be back far sooner than either of us expected. And I definitely didn't know that the next time I saw her, she'd be crying in my arms. I didn't mean to go back the very next day. But around noon, I found myself walking the same streets again. The sun was high, the sidewalks hot beneath my shoes, and for some reason, I turned the corner toward Josh's house without thinking. Rachel was outside this time. She was kneeling by the flower bed, wearing gardening gloves and a wide straw hat. Her t-shirt clung slightly to her back with sweat, and a small radio played soft music from the porch. I almost turned around. It felt intrusive, like I was stepping into a moment I wasn't supposed to see. But then she looked up and smiled. "Back already?" she asked, standing and brushing her knees. I scratched the back of my neck. "I was just walking. Thought I'd say hi." "Well," she said, tilting her head slightly, "you picked the perfect time. I could use a strong back." I helped her finish planting the last of the petunias. We worked side by side for over an hour, talking in lazy rhythms, the way people do when the silence isn't uncomfortable. She told me about how the garden used to be her escape when Josh was younger, how she'd sneak out with her coffee before anyone else woke up just to dig in the dirt and think. "I don't do it as much now," she said. "Some days it just feels pointless." I looked over at her. There was dirt on her cheek, a smudge above her brow. But it wasn't just the sweat or sun that made her look tired. It was something deeper. I didn't ask what she meant. I just passed her the trowel. After we finished, she offered me lemonade and we sat on the back porch, both of us facing the yard. The swing creaked gently in the breeze. There was something nostalgic about it. The way the sunlight filtered through the trees, the way the grass was overgrown in the corners. I remembered being 13, chasing Josh with water balloons across this very lawn, slipping in the mud and laughing until my stomach hurt. "You boys used to drive me crazy out here," she said, as if reading my mind. "I must have washed 100 muddy shirts that summer." I laughed. "You always made cookies anyway." She smiled softly. "Yeah, I guess I liked having a full house." The smile faded just a little. She leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. And then I asked, "Do you miss it? You know, the noise?" Her eyes opened slowly. "Every day," she said. It wasn't dramatic, just honest. I wanted to ask about her husband, Josh's dad. He'd passed away during my first year at college, but I never got the full story. Josh had mentioned it once in a text, brief and numb. I hadn't pushed. Now, watching Rachel look out across the empty yard, I understood why. It wasn't something she offered easily. Instead, I asked, "Do you need help with anything else?" "Around the house." She looked at me for a moment, really looked, then smiled faintly. "Actually, the ceiling fan in the guest room makes this awful grinding noise. I keep meaning to check it, but I never do." "I can take a look." "Only if you want to." "I do." She led me upstairs, and as I walked behind her, I realized how strange it felt to be back in this house like this. Grown now, seeing the space with different eyes. The guest room was neat, lightly scented with lavender. I pulled over a chair and stood on it to inspect the fan. Loose screws. Simple enough. As I worked, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me. "You're good at this," she said. "I've had a lot of practice. My apartment's a disaster. I've basically rebuilt half of it with duct tape and desperation." She laughed, a real one this time. "Well, let me know if you ever want to trade places." When I was finished, she offered dinner. Said it was nothing fancy, just pasta and a bottle of wine she'd been meaning to open for weeks. We ate in the kitchen with the windows open, the warm evening air drifting in. She'd lit a candle in the center of the table. I wasn't sure if it was for ambience or just habit. We talked more freely this time. She asked about college, about my major, about whether I still drew, something I used to do constantly when I was younger. I was surprised she remembered. "Of course I do," she said. "You used to sit at that table over there for hours with your sketchpad." I shook my head. "That was a long time ago. Doesn't mean it wasn't real." She said it softly, but the words stayed with me. After dinner, she walked me to the door again. But this time she lingered. "Thanks for today," she said. "I don't realize how quiet this house is until someone fills it again." "I don't mind being the noise," I said before I could think. She smiled. Her eyes didn't leave mine, and for a second, it felt like we were both standing at the edge of something we couldn't name. Then she looked down. "Well, come by any time. Really." "I will." As I walked home, the sky turning violet above the rooftops, I realized something had shifted. Not just in her, in me. She wasn't just Josh's mom anymore. She was Rachel, and something about her sadness made me want to stay. It was a Tuesday when it happened. The sky had that pale gray tint, the kind that makes everything feel still, not gloomy, just suspended. I just finished a morning jog and was halfway through a protein bar when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Then a message. "Hi, it's Rachel. Sorry to bother you, but my car won't start. I think the battery's dead. Would you mind giving me a ride to the store? Only if you're free." I read it twice. My heart thumped louder than it should have. I typed back, "I'm free. Be there in 10. The drive was short, just a quick run to the grocery store and back. But sitting beside her in my car, windows down, soft pop music barely audible from the radio, I couldn't ignore how different it felt from anything we'd done before. There was something unspoken resting between us. Not tension exactly, but weight. She wore jeans and a dark green top, her hair loose around her shoulders. No makeup, but she didn't need it. She looked tired. Not in a bad way, in a real way. When we pulled into the store parking lot, she turned to me before unbuckling her seatbelt. "You're a lifesaver," she said. "I honestly didn't know who else to call." "I'm glad you called me," I replied, and I meant it. Inside the store, we walked side by side through the aisles. She picked up a few essentials, coffee, a loaf of bread, some fruit, and we talked about nothing and everything. Felt like we were just two people. Not college kid and friend's mom. Just us. Checkout, I reached for my wallet. "No way," she said, playfully swatting my hand. "I asked for a ride, not a sugar daddy." I burst out laughing, maybe louder than I should have. She laughed too, then looked at me with a warmth I hadn't seen before. Back in the car, she was quieter. She tapped her fingers against the paper bag on her lap, looking out the window as we drove. Her house came into view far too fast. I parked, and just as I reached for the gear shift, she said, "You want to come in for coffee? I just bought some." Seems rude not to offer. I hesitated only a second. "Sure." Inside, She set the groceries down and moved through the kitchen with automatic grace. I sat at the small table near the window, the one I'd sat at countless times as a kid. The coffee smelled rich, familiar. She handed me a mug and sat across from me. We talked about Josh, about her work, about how lonely the house felt sometimes. Her voice didn't tremble, but her eyes did. And then, without warning, she said, "Do you ever feel like you're just pretending to be okay all the time?" I blinked. "All the time," I said quietly. She nodded, as if that confirmed something. Then she looked away. "I miss him," she said. "Not just him. The life we had. The normal stuff. Sunday mornings. Grocery runs. Someone else breathing in the room while you fall asleep." I didn't say anything. I didn't want to interrupt what was clearly breaking through a wall inside her. "I know people think I've moved on. They say all the right things. You're so strong, Rachel. You're doing great. But most days, I feel like I'm walking through fog, pretending I know where I'm going." She paused, her hands wrapped around the coffee mug like it was the only thing anchoring her. "I'm tired, Ryan." And then, to my absolute shock, her eyes welled with tears. She didn't sob. She didn't wail. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like the kind of crying someone does when they've held it in for far too long. I stood slowly, walked around the table. She didn't move. I knelt beside her chair, hesitating only a second before placing my hand gently on her arm. And then she turned, just slightly. She leaned into me, her head pressed softly against my shoulder. Her fingers reached up and clutched the sleeve of my shirt. And just like that, she cried. Not loud, not messy, but real. I wrapped my arms around her. I didn't think about it. It was the only thing I could do, and she didn't resist. I held her there, in that kitchen filled with sunlight and silence, and let her fall apart. Time didn't matter. Nothing else did. When she finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes and let out a shaky laugh. "Sorry," she whispered. "That was probably too much." "It wasn't," I said. "Not even close." She looked at me for a long time after that. Something passed between us, something that neither of us dared name. She stood and took a deep breath. "I should probably make lunch or something." "I can help," I said quickly. She smiled. "You always do." That afternoon, we made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. She hummed while she stirred. I sliced cheese too thick. We laughed. And just like that, the fog began to lift. Not all of it, but enough to breathe. When I left later that day, she walked me to the door like always. But this time, as I stepped outside, she reached for my hand. Just briefly, just enough. "Thank you, Ryan," she said. Her voice was soft, steady. "For being here." I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. I walked home with the feeling of her hand still in mine, and the quiet realization that the line between comfort and something more had started to blur. I didn't sleep much that night, not because something dramatic had happened, not in the way people imagine when they hear stories like this, but because something small had happened, something real, and it echoed louder in my mind than any kiss or confession ever could. I had held her. She had let me, and neither of us had pulled away. The next morning, I stared at my phone for what felt like an hour before finally sending a text. "I left my hoodie at your place. Mind if I swing by later?" It wasn't about the hoodie. We both knew that. But I needed an excuse. Something simple. Something that wouldn't scare either of us away. Her reply came 3 minutes later. "Of course. I'll be here." 3 hours later, I was knocking on her door again. Rachel opened it barefoot, in black leggings and a loose beige sweatshirt that hung gently off one shoulder. Her hair was pulled up, a few strands escaping near her temples. She looked softer somehow, less guarded, like the storm inside her had quieted, if only for a moment. "I think your hoodie's on the back of the chair," she said, stepping aside. I walked in, grabbed it, and turned toward her. "Found it." But I didn't leave. She didn't ask me to. Instead, she said, "I was just about to start dinner. Feel like helping again." Dinner turned into music on low volume. A bottle of red wine she said she was saving for a night that mattered, and the smell of garlic and roasted tomatoes filling the house. We moved around the kitchen like we had done it 100 times. I chopped. She stirred. We bumped into each other, laughed. But every now and then the silence would fall, and we'd just look at each other. Not long, not intense, just long enough. When dinner was ready, we sat at the counter. No candles this time, just us, the dim light from the stove, and the soft clinking of silverware. "I forgot how nice it is to cook for someone," she said, halfway through her second glass of wine. "You haven't?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "Not since Josh left. Not really." I looked down. "I used to think grown-ups didn't get lonely." She smiled faintly. "That's because we're good at hiding it." When we finished eating, she brought out an old photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. We sat on the couch flipping through the pages. Birthdays, vacations, blurry snapshots of summer afternoons. And then we landed on a picture of the three of us. Me, Josh, and Rachel at the beach. I was probably 10. She had her arms around us, smiling into the camera with the wind blowing through her hair. "I loved that day," she whispered, almost to herself. I glanced at her. Her expression had softened, but her eyes were distant. "I remember you making us peanut butter sandwiches and getting mad when we got sand in them." She laughed quietly. "I wasn't mad. I just pretended to be." She turned the page. Another picture. This one was of me and Josh asleep on the couch after a long day. Heads tilted back, mouths open, exhausted. Rachel was in the corner of the frame, caught mid-laugh, holding a bowl of popcorn. "You always made us feel safe," I said. Her hand stopped on the page. She turned to me. "You always made me feel needed." Something passed through the air between us then, subtle but unmistakable. She set the album down, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then she reached for my hand, just gently, without force, and held it between hers. Her thumb moved slowly across my knuckles. I felt my chest tighten. "I've been trying so hard not to see you like this," she said quietly. "Like what?" "Like someone who makes me feel seen." My heart beat so loudly I was sure she could hear it. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. Her eyes met mine, wide, scared, honest. And then, just above a whisper, "Would you stay? Just for a little while?" I nodded. She stood and led me upstairs. Not to her room, to the guest room. She handed me a pair of folded sweatpants and a clean t-shirt. "They might be a little big." "That's okay," I said. My voice felt far away. She stepped out to give me privacy. I changed, folded my clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed, unsure what to do next. Then there was a soft knock. "Ryan." I opened the door. She was standing there in an oversized flannel and pajama shorts. Her hair was loose now, falling just past her shoulders. Barefoot, her arms crossed lightly over her chest. She paused. "I forgot to say good night." It was such a simple sentence, but something about the way she said it, the crack in her voice, the weight behind it, made my chest ache. I stepped closer. She reached up, slowly, and placed her palm against my cheek. Not rushed, not unsure, like she'd been wanting to do it for years but hadn't allowed herself. "Good night," she whispered. And then, just as slowly, She leaned forward and rested her forehead against mine. We didn't kiss. Not yet. We just stood there, breathing the same air, eyes closed, touching, not like strangers, not like family, but like two people who had lived entire lives in silence and were just now learning how to speak again. She pulled back, barely, and looked into my eyes. "I don't know what this is," she said. "Me neither. But it doesn't feel wrong." "No," I whispered. "It doesn't." She smiled then, the kind of smile that lives in your memory forever. Then she turned and walked to her room, left the door slightly open, and I stood there, still feeling the warmth of her hand on my face. I didn't fall asleep right away. I lay there in the quiet guest room, surrounded by still air and soft shadows, staring at the ceiling like it had answers. The fan above spun slowly, clicking faintly with every turn, and I wondered if this was the same sound that kept her up too. If she was lying just on the other side of the wall, eyes open, replaying everything like I was. I thought about her touch, the way she had looked at me, the way she'd said goodnight like she meant more than just that. At some point, I sat up. I don't remember deciding to. I just did. The hallway was dim, only the small light in the corner glowing faintly. Her door was cracked open the way she'd left it. I stood there for a moment, listening. Then I knocked once, softly. Not loud enough to wake her if she was asleep, but just enough if she wasn't. Her voice came back, barely louder than a whisper. "Ryan." "Yeah, sorry. I couldn't sleep." A pause. Then, "Come in." I pushed the door open. She was sitting up in bed, the covers folded in her lap, hair tousled from the pillow. She wore that same flannel shirt, sleeves pushed to her elbows, collar slightly open. The lamp beside her bathed the room in a soft amber glow. She looked like a dream I hadn't realized I'd been having all my life. "I didn't mean to wake you," I said quietly. "You didn't." I stood near the door, unsure of what to say next. The moment stretched, not awkward, just fragile. Then she tilted her head slightly. "You okay?" I nodded. "I just couldn't stop thinking about." I hesitated. "You." She inhaled softly, her eyes never leaving mine. "I've been thinking too." Silence again. But now the air between us wasn't just still, it was humming. And then she said it, gently, carefully. "Do you want to sit?" I moved slowly, as if afraid I'd break something if I rushed. I sat on the edge of the bed, not close, not far. My hands rested on my knees. She turned toward me. "I know this is complicated," she said. "I know. And I don't want to confuse you or make you feel. You're not," I said. She looked at me then, eyes soft and unguarded. "I feel alive when you're here, like I remember how it feels to be seen. Not as someone's mom, not as a widow, just me." I couldn't speak, because I felt the same way. I reached for her hand. She let me, her fingers curled around mine, slow and deliberate. Her skin was warm, her pulse quick. "I've wanted to kiss you for days," she said. "But I was afraid it would ruin everything." "It wouldn't." "You sure? Are you?" She didn't answer with words. She leaned in, and this time nothing held us back. The kiss was soft, searching. Her lips moved slowly, testing, learning. I matched her rhythm. It wasn't about hunger or urgency. It was about understanding. Two people mapping each other in real time, like the only language they had left was touch. Her hand found the side of my neck, fingers resting just below my jaw. I slid closer, my other hand gently settling on her hip, and she responded with a quiet sigh that felt like an invitation. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. The moments unfolded with a kind of reverence, like we both knew this wasn't just physical. It was emotional, complicated, and maybe even wrong in the eyes of the world. But in that room, in that sliver of time, it felt right. When we finally broke apart, her forehead rested against mine. We were both quiet, our breathing in sync. "I shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "Do you regret it?" "No." "Then it's okay." Her hand slipped from mine, and for a second I thought she was pulling away. But then she reached behind her, pulled back the blanket, and whispered, "Stay." I climbed in beside her. The sheets were warm, the bed soft. She faced me, eyes wide open in the low light, her fingers resting lightly on my chest. We didn't talk much after that. We just lay there, close and quiet, her head tucked under my chin, our legs tangled together beneath the covers. The storm outside had returned, soft rain tapping the windows like a metronome for our silence. At some point, I fell asleep with her fingers still laced in mine. When I woke the next morning, the sunlight spilled through the curtain in thin golden streams. She was already awake, watching me with a half smile and tired eyes. "Morning," I said. "Hi," she whispered. Neither of us moved, because we both knew everything had changed, and we couldn't pretend it hadn't. For a few hours that morning, we pretended nothing needed to be said. She made coffee in the kitchen while I leaned against the doorway in the borrowed t-shirt. Her movements were quiet, familiar, like I had always been there. The house smelled like toast and cinnamon, and the radio hummed some soft jazz in the background. We didn't talk about the night, but everything in the way we looked at each other said that we both remembered every second of it. She handed me a cup without meeting my eyes. Our fingers didn't brush this time, not because she avoided it, but because we both knew that touch now meant something more, something dangerous. "I should get dressed," she finally said. "Yeah," I nodded. "Me too." The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was respectful, careful. By the time I had folded the sheets on the guest bed and gotten dressed, she was in the living room, hair pulled back, a light sweater covering her shoulders. Back to herself, back to safe territory. "I should go," I said, standing near the door. She nodded, then hesitated. "Ryan." I looked at her. "I'm not sure what this was," she said, "or what it is." "I know. I don't regret it," she added quickly, her voice steadier than I expected. "But I'm also not naive. This can't be something we pretend is simple." I stepped closer carefully. "I never thought it was." Her eyes searched mine, tired, but still warm. "You're important to me. You always have been. But I'm scared of what this could turn into, what it already is." I swallowed. "I am too." She reached out, almost by instinct, and touched my arm. Just once. A grounding gesture. "I think we need space," she whispered, and I understood. Even before she said it, I'd felt it in the way her shoulders had stiffened when I stood too close, in the way her voice had softened when she offered me coffee, as if trying to return to something simpler, something we could control. "I'll go," I said. She nodded, but as I turned to open the door, she called after me. "Ryan." I looked back. She looked so small then, not in size but in presence, like someone who had opened a part of herself she didn't know was still there, and wasn't sure how to close it again. "Thank you for holding me that night." I held her gaze. "I'll always be here if you need me." Then I stepped outside, pulling the door gently shut behind me. The days that followed were long. Hot July afternoons stretched into heavy, quiet evenings. I kept busy, running errands for my parents, catching up with old classmates, working part-time at the bookstore downtown. But everything I did, everywhere I went, was shadowed by her, by the sound of her laugh in my memory, by the feeling of her head against my chest, by the warmth of her breath when she whispered my name. We didn't text. We didn't call. But I passed her street once. Then again. Then almost every day. And I'd always slow down. Always glance toward the porch, wondering if she was there. She never was. 2 weeks later, I was closing up at the bookstore when my phone lit up. Rachel, can you come by? I understand if you can't. But I'd like to see you. No overthinking this time. No pretending I didn't want to. I grabbed my bag and drove. When she opened the door, she looked different. Not tired. Not heavy. Just real. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I wasn't sure I could stay away, I replied. We stood in silence, that familiar hush between us returning like a memory. Then she stepped aside. I walked in. We didn't fall into each other's arms. There were no more rushed kisses. No more whispered apologies. Just two people who had shared something rare. Something that didn't need to be explained. We sat on the couch, knees barely touching. I've been thinking a lot, she said, about what happened, about what it meant. I stayed quiet, let her speak. You gave me something I didn't even know I needed, she continued. A moment of feeling wanted, not for what I could give or how I fit into someone else's life. Just for me. I nodded slowly. You were never just Josh's mom to me. She looked at me, a flicker of something soft in her eyes. I know. She reached into the cushion beside her and pulled out the photo album again. The same one from that night. I didn't get to show you the last page, she said. She opened it. There was a photo I hadn't seen before. One of me, Josh, and Rachel sitting in lawn chairs in the backyard, laughing. Someone must have taken it from inside the house. I looked so young in it, so unaware. She smiled. That was the summer you two tried to build a treehouse and gave up after one day. I laughed. We said it was too hot. You said it was unsafe. I think that was your way of telling me you'd rather stay inside where the snacks were. I looked at her. It wasn't about the snacks. I know. We sat there for a long time, holding the book open between us. And then she closed it. I don't know what the future looks like, she said. I don't know if we'll ever talk about this again. I nodded. That's okay. But I want you to know, I'll never forget the night you stayed, or the morning after, or the way you looked at me when I felt most unlovable. My throat tightened. I'll never forget any of it, I whispered. She leaned forward then, and gently, without expectation, hugged me. It wasn't a hungry embrace, not desperate, just full. Her arms wrapped around me and I held her back, like I had that day in the kitchen, when her walls had cracked and she had cried in my arms. But this time she wasn't breaking. This time she was whole. When I left that evening, there was no finality, no dramatic goodbye, just a quiet, mutual understanding that what we were for a moment was real, and that sometimes a moment is enough. As I drove away, I passed her streetlight flickering behind me. I thought about that first afternoon, about the way her eyes softened when she saw me, about the weight of her body trembling in my arms when she finally let go. And I realized she had changed me, and maybe in some small way I had changed her too. She was my best friend's mom. But that day, she was a woman who needed to be held. And I held her like I'd never let go. Even now, I haven't.